Emily had never been a heavy sleeper, but lately her nights had grown restless. Every sound in her small apartment seemed amplified once the clock passed midnight. Pipes groaned, the refrigerator hummed strangely, and the wooden floor sometimes creaked as if someone had just stepped across it. She told herself it was normal in an older building. Still, there was something about the silence between those noises that unsettled her. One night, exhaustion finally overcame her, and she drifted into a troubled dream. In the dream, she was lying in her bed, exactly as she was in reality. The room looked the same, the curtains drawn, the faint orange glow of the streetlight slipping through the window. But something was wrong. Her chest ached, her lungs screamed for air, and no matter how she tried, she could not breathe. It felt as if something heavy pressed down on her ribcage, stealing every ounce of oxygen. She fought, her body thrashing in the dream, but the more she struggled, the greater the weight became. Panic clawed at her mind. She thought she might suffocate, and then, with a violent gasp, her eyes flew open. For a moment, relief washed over her. She was awake. At least, she thought she was. But quickly she realized she couldn't move. Her arms were pinned to her sides, her legs frozen, her entire body paralyzed. Her eyes darted desperately around the room, the only part of her that would obey. That was when she saw it. A figure bent over her bed. It was the shape of an old woman, her back hunched, her posture twisted as if she carried an unbearable burden. Her thin, frail hand seemed to rest directly on Emily's chest, pressing down with unnatural force. Emily's ribs felt like they might snap beneath the invisible pressure. But the face was wrong. Where eyes, nose, and mouth should have been, there was only a blur. The features looked smudged, shifting, as if her mind was refusing to process what she was seeing. It was almost worse than seeing a real face, because the incompleteness left her imagination to fill in the horror. Emily wanted to scream, to beg for help, but no sound came. Her throat locked, her lungs burned. The faceless head tilted slightly, hovering closer, as if studying her reaction. She could feel the cold radiating from it, chilling her skin even through the blanket. Her heart pounded. She forced every ounce of her will into moving a single finger, a hand, anything. For endless seconds, nothing happened. Then, her pinky twitched. That tiny motion seemed to break something. Suddenly, her whole body snapped free. Emily shot upright, gasping violently, clutching her chest. She lunged for the lamp and flicked it on, flooding the room with a soft yellow glow. The corner where the figure had been was empty. The air was still. The room looked normal. She sat frozen, drenched in sweat, her breath ragged. "Just a dream," she whispered to herself. "Just a dream." She repeated the words over and over until her voice steadied. Eventually, she convinced herself it was nothing more than sleep paralysis, a strange but documented phenomenon. She had read about it before. Hallucinations, a trick of the mind, nothing more. But when morning came, something shattered that fragile explanation. As sunlight spilled across her bed, Emily noticed indentations in her sheets, deep, defined impressions right where her chest had been. Another at the edge of the mattress, as though someone had been sitting there for hours. She reached out with a trembling hand, touching the dip in the fabric. The spot was cold. Emily spent the rest of the morning in silence, avoiding the sight of her bed. She busied herself with making coffee, scrolling through her phone, anything to erase the memory of what she had seen. But every time her eyes wandered back toward the bedroom, she felt her stomach knot. The impressions on the sheets were still there, undeniable proof that something had been pressing down on her body. By afternoon, she convinced herself it was explainable. Maybe she had pressed her own arm into the fabric during the night. Maybe the weight of her body had shifted in a strange way, but when she lay back down to test the theory, the marks didn't match. They were deeper, heavier, as though another person entirely had been there. That evening, she called her best friend Rachel. "You're going to think I've lost my mind," Emily began nervously. "But I swear someone or something was in my room last night. I couldn't move. I couldn't breathe. It was like an old woman pressing down on me. And when I woke up, there were marks, real marks." Rachel was quiet for a long time before finally speaking. "My grandmother used to tell me about something like that," she said slowly. "She called it the night hag, an old spirit that sits on people while they sleep. She said if you ever see her clearly, her real face, it means she's chosen you." Emily laughed weakly, trying to shake off the chill that crawled down her spine. "That's comforting. Thanks." "I'm serious," Rachel replied. "Don't look at her. If it happens again, don't let her face come into focus." That night, Emily left the lamp on. She kept her phone clutched in her hand, determined to stay awake. Hours passed. Her eyelids grew heavy despite her efforts, and eventually, exhaustion won. When she woke again, the room was silent. Too silent. Her body was frozen. The weight returned instantly, heavier than before, crushing the air from her lungs. Panic surged as her eyes darted around the room. And there she was, leaning over the bed once more. The hunched shoulders, the thin, frail hands, the faceless blur where features should have been. Emily tried to close her eyes, but terror kept them wide open. And this time, something was different. The blur shifted. Slowly, deliberately, the face began to take shape. Shadows deepened, lines sharpened. She thought she saw the curve of a mouth, the hollow of eye sockets beginning to form. Rachel's warning echoed in her mind. Don't let her face become clear. Emily squeezed her eyes shut, forcing her body to move. She focused on her toes, her fingers, anything. The weight pressed harder, punishing her resistance. Felt as though the air itself had turned to stone. Her chest burned. She thought she might black out. Then suddenly, her hand twitched. The paralysis shattered. Emily shot upright with a gasp, clutching her blanket. The lamp so glowed. The corner of her room was empty. She sobbed with relief, shaking uncontrollably. But when she looked down, her relief dissolved. The indentations were there again. Only this time, they weren't just on her chest. They lined the edge of the bed, pressed deep into the fabric, as though someone had been sitting calmly right beside her while she slept. 4 hours, watching. Emily didn't sleep again that night. She sat with her back to the wall, every light in the apartment on, waiting for dawn. When the first rays of sunlight finally touched her window, she dared to glance back at the sheets one more time. The impressions were still there, and this time, they looked fresh. I never considered myself the kind of person who scares easily. Living alone has never bothered me. I like the quiet, the freedom to leave dishes in the sink if I want, the comfort of knowing that everything in the apartment is exactly where I left it. No unexpected footsteps, no second toothbrush in the bathroom, no sounds except the hum of the refrigerator or the occasional car passing on the street below. But sometimes, when you live alone long enough, the silence itself begins to feel alive. It started with little things. A creak in the hallway when I knew the building had settled hours ago. A faint draft brushing against my ear while the windows were shut. Shadows that seemed a little too heavy in the corners of my room. I always found an explanation. Old buildings make noises. Your brain plays tricks when you're tired. Light bends in strange ways. That's what I told myself. Last week, though, something changed. I woke up in the middle of the night with no clear reason. My eyes opened instantly, as though someone had shaken me awake. The clock on the nightstand read 3:07 a.m. The air in the room felt thick, pressing down on me. I tried to shift, to roll onto my side, but my body wouldn't respond. I knew what was happening. Sleep paralysis. I had read about it before. People describe waking up, unable to move, seeing things that aren't there. Hallucinations, doctors call them. The brain half dreaming, half awake. But knowing that didn't make it any less terrifying. Because in the corner of my room, by the closet, something was standing. It wasn't the shape of clothes hanging or the tricks of shadows. I knew this room too well. The figure was tall, almost touching the ceiling, and utterly black. So dark, it seemed to eat the dim light from the alarm clock. It didn't move. It didn't breathe. It just stood there, angled slightly toward me, as if it had been waiting for me to open my eyes. My chest tightened. My eyes darted, but my head wouldn't turn. The only sound was my own ragged breath, trapped shallow in my throat. I tried to scream, but nothing came out. And then I heard it. Not from across the room, not from the corner where the figure loomed, but right beside me. A whisper brushed against my ear, soft, deliberate, almost intimate. "I see you." I froze. My heart thrashed against my ribs. There was no one next to me. I knew that. The bed was empty. But the warmth of the whisper lingered, like someone had leaned close enough for their lips to almost touch my skin. I prayed for my body to move. Seconds crawled by like hours, until at last, the invisible grip loosened. I shot upright, gasping, and slammed my hand onto the lamp switch. Light filled the room. The corner was empty. No figure, no shadow, nothing. I stumbled out of bed, every limb trembling, and pressed my back to the wall. I stayed awake until dawn, telling myself over and over that it had been nothing but a nightmare mixed with sleep paralysis. But when morning came, I noticed something that destroyed any sense of rational explanation. Along the base of the wall, right where the shadow had stood, were marks. Jagged, uneven, raw grooves etched deep into the patent plaster. Not like the smooth scrape of moving furniture, but more like claw marks, wild and desperate, dragging downward, as if something had been trying to get out. I spent the entire day trying to convince myself that the scratches on the wall had always been there. Maybe I just hadn't noticed before. Maybe the landlord had patched something up badly. I told myself every excuse I could, but deep down I knew the truth. Those marks were new, and they weren't the kind of marks that just happened by accident. That night, I went to bed with every light in the apartment left on. It didn't matter. At some point, exhaustion dragged me under. When I woke again, it was 3:12 a.m. The lights I'd left burning were off. Every single one. My room was steeped in shadows so heavy, they seemed to pulse with each beat of my heart. I tried to move. Nothing. My body was frozen again. The figure was back. Not in the corner this time, but closer, halfway across the room. Its form was clearer now, not just a smear of black, but something almost human in shape. Broad shoulders, elongated arms, a head tilted unnaturally low. I couldn't breathe. The air felt like ice in my lungs. And then the whisper came right against my ear again. Though I could see with my own eyes, there was no one beside me. "Let me out." The voice was low, almost pleading. I wanted to scream, to tell it no, to beg for this nightmare to stop. But I was silent, trapped inside my own useless body. "Let me out," it said again, more urgent this time. My gaze, desperate to look anywhere but at the thing, fell to the wall, the same place where I had seen the scratches that morning. In the pale red glow of the alarm clock, I could see new lines gouged into the plaster, fresh ones, long, deep, curling together into something like a rough outline. A rectangle, a door. The paralysis broke in a rush. I bolted upright, fumbling for the lamp. Light surged across the room, and in an instant, the figure was gone. But the scratches weren't. They spread farther now, climbing higher, cutting deeper. The shape of the door was undeniable. My hands shook as I touched the wall. The grooves were real, raw beneath my fingertips. That morning, I covered the marks with an old dresser. I told myself I could block it, hide it, pretend it didn't exist. But the next night, when I returned from work, the dresser had shifted several inches away from the wall. I hadn't touched it. The marks had grown again. For days, I tried everything. Sleeping at a friend's place, leaving the apartment altogether, blasting music to drown out the silence. But somehow, each night ended the same. I'd wake at 3 a.m., frozen, staring at the figure that always came back. And always, the whisper, "Let me out! The wall can't be hidden anymore." The scratches spread wider every day, regardless of what I move in front of them. The rectangle is almost complete, a perfect door carved into plaster and paint. Sometimes, when I stand too close, I feel a draft, as though something on the other side is breathing. Last night, the whisper changed. It wasn't just beside me anymore. It was behind the wall. I could hear it through the scratches, muffled but distinct, like a voice carried through a thin door, almost. I don't know what will happen when the outline is finished. I don't know what's waiting for me on the other side. But tonight, as I write this, the final corner of the rectangle is nearly done, and I can already hear fingernails tapping from within, waiting for me to answer. Open the door. I spent the entire day trying to convince myself that the scratches on the wall had always been there. Maybe I just hadn't noticed before. Maybe the landlord had patched something up badly. I told myself every excuse I could, but deep down I knew the truth. Those marks were new, and they weren't the kind of marks that just happened by accident. That night, I went to bed with every light in the apartment left on. It didn't matter. At some point, exhaustion dragged me under. When I woke again, it was 3:12 a.m. The lights I'd left burning were off. Every single one. My room was steeped in shadows so heavy they seemed to pulse with each beat of my heart. I tried to move. Nothing. My body was frozen again. The figure was back. Not in the corner this time, but closer. Halfway across the room. Its form was clearer now. Not just a smear of black, but something almost human in shape. Broad shoulders, elongated arms, a head tilted unnaturally low. I couldn't breathe. The air felt like ice in my lungs. And then the whisper came, right against my ear again. Though I could see with my own eyes, there was no one beside me. Let me out. The voice was low, almost pleading. I wanted to scream, to tell it no, to beg for this nightmare to stop. But I was silent, trapped inside my own useless body. Let me out, it said again, more urgent this time. My gaze, desperate to look anywhere but at the thing, fell to the wall, the same place where I had seen the scratches that morning. In the pale red glow of the alarm clock, I could see new lines gouged into the plaster. Fresh ones, long, deep, curling together into something like a rough outline. A rectangle, a door. The paralysis broke in a rush. I bolted upright, fumbling for the lamp. Light surged across the room, and in an instant, the figure was gone. But the scratches weren't. They spread farther now, climbing higher, cutting deeper. The shape of the door was undeniable. My hands shook as I touched the wall. The grooves were real, raw beneath my fingertips. That morning, I covered the marks with an old dresser. I told myself I could block it, hide it, pretend it didn't exist. But the next night, when I returned from work, the dresser had shifted several inches away from the wall. I hadn't touched it. The marks had grown again. For days, I tried everything. Sleeping at a friend's place, leaving the apartment altogether, blasting music to drown out the silence. But somehow, each night ended the same. I'd wake at 3 a.m., frozen, staring at the figure that always came back. And always the whisper, "Let me out. The wall can't be hidden anymore." The scratches spread wider every day, regardless of what I move in front of them. The rectangle is almost complete, a perfect door carved into plaster and paint. Sometimes when I stand too close, I feel a draft, as though something on the other side is breathing. Last night, the whisper changed. It wasn't just beside me anymore. It was behind the wall. I could hear it through the scratches, muffled but distinct, like a voice carried through a thin door. Almost. I don't know what will happen when the outline is finished. I don't know what's waiting for me on the other side. But tonight, as I write this, the final corner of the rectangle is nearly done. And I can already hear fingernails tapping from within, waiting for me to answer. Open the door. Daniel had always hated how real dreams could feel. But this one was different. It wasn't just vivid. It was personal. He stood in an endless hallway, its pale walls stretching far into the distance. The air was heavy, as if time itself slowed inside the space. At the far end, a faint light shone through a door, left slightly ajar. And then he heard it. A sound that didn't belong in dreams, a phone ringing. The tone was muffled, distorted, as though echoing through water. He reached into his pocket and pulled out his phone. The glow of the screen cast a pale reflection on his face. The name on the display made his stomach twist into knots. Michael, his brother, dead for 5 years. Daniel froze, staring at the name. Every nerve screamed to let the phone ring, to drop it, to run. But the hallway gave him nowhere to run, and the screen kept pulsing insistently in his hand. With trembling hesitation, he pressed the green button. The connection clicked. "Daniel?" The voice was unmistakable. Michael's voice, urgent, strained, carrying the same warmth Daniel remembered from late-night conversations, but now coated with dread. Daniel's throat tightened. "Michael? How?" "Don't move," the voice interrupted, sharp and terrified. "He's here." The line dissolved into static, then silence. A chill ran down Daniel's spine. His vision swam. He tried to speak again, but the words tangled inside his throat. Before he could react, the dream collapsed into darkness. He jolted awake. His eyes shot open and panic gripped him instantly. Something was wrong. He was in his own bed. The shadows of his bedroom stretched across familiar walls, but he couldn't move. His chest rose and fell in shallow gasps, yet his arms and legs refused to obey. His jaw clenched, lips parted, but no sound emerged. He was trapped, paralyzed, awake inside a body that had betrayed him. The room was silent, oppressively silent, until the vibration of his phone rattled against the wooden surface of the nightstand beside him. The sound, ordinary in daylight, now seemed impossibly loud in the stillness. His eyes strained toward it. The screen lit up, glowing softly in the dark. But there was no name, no number. The screen was blank. Still, the phone buzzed. Daniel's pulse, thundered in his ears. He tried again to force a movement, any movement, to reach for the phone, but the paralysis held him hostage. Sweat prickled at his forehead, his breath shallow and quick, and then, from beyond the bedroom, came another sound. A footstep. Heavy, deliberate, slow. The sound came from the kitchen. Another step followed, dragging slightly against the floorboards. Whoever it was moved with purpose, each pause calculated to be heard. Daniel's heart pounded. Michael's warning echoed in his skull. Don't move. He's here. The phone buzzed harder, rattling against the nightstand. The noise blended with the approaching steps, creating a rhythm of dread. His eyes locked onto the shadowed doorway at the end of the hall. Step, pause, step, closer now. The phone's vibration grew frantic, as if urging him to act. And then, silence. The footsteps stopped. The buzzing ceased. The room was left in suffocating quiet. Daniel's heartbeat, the only sound filling it. Seconds dragged on, each one heavier than the last. Then, with a sudden rush, the paralysis lifted. His body jolted free. His arms shook as he pushed himself upright, sucking in desperate gulps of air. For a moment, he sat frozen, afraid to look anywhere but at the phone. It lay motionless on the nightstand. Dark screen, no ringing, no vibration. With trembling hands, he reached for it. The smooth glass was cold against his fingertips. He unlocked the screen, and his breath caught in his throat. There it was, a missed call from unknown number. Daniel stared at the phone as if it might burn through his hand. The timestamp on the missed call showed it had happened only seconds ago, while he lay paralyzed, while the footsteps crept across his apartment. He rose to his feet on shaky legs, every muscle aching as though he had run a marathon in his sleep. The apartment was silent now, yet the weight of that silence felt unnatural, like a curtain drawn to conceal something just behind it. He stepped into the hallway, the boards under his bare feet creaking faintly. His pulse hammered in his ears. The kitchen loomed ahead, faint light spilling in from the window above the sink. He paused, listening. The refrigerator hummed softly, but nothing else stirred. Still, he couldn't shake the sensation that someone had just been here. He forced himself forward, scanning the corners of the kitchen, the shadows beneath the table, the open doorway to the living room. All empty. When he turned back toward the hallway, his phone buzzed again in his hand. Daniel's stomach twisted. The screen lit up with the same blank display. Unknown number. His thumb hovered over the green button. Fear clawed at him, urging him not to answer, but a pull stronger than logic guided him. With trembling hesitation, he pressed accept. The line clicked. At first, only silence. Then, faintly, a voice he knew better than his own. Daniel, Michael. His brother's voice, soft but urgent. Daniel's chest constricted. Michael? What's happening? The line crackled with static, then steadied. Don't move, Michael whispered. He's in the room with you. Daniel froze where he stood. His eyes darted to the hallway. The shadows there seemed thicker than before, clinging unnaturally to the walls. His breathing quickened, the air sharp and dry in his throat. What do you mean? He whispered into the phone. There's no one here. You can't see him, Michael said, his tone heavy with dread. But he can see you. Daniel's hand shook so violently he nearly dropped the phone. He glanced around his apartment, each shadow now alive with potential menace. His reflection in the kitchen window caught his attention, only it didn't seem quite right. The movements lagged by a fraction of a second, a slight delay that made his skin crawl. Michael, Daniel whispered, his voice trembling. What do I do? The silence stretched on for a moment too long. Then the line distorted, warping Michael's voice until it sounded broken, torn. Through the static came words that froze Daniel's blood. "You already let him in." The call ended. The phone went black in Daniel's hand. The apartment was silent again, unbearably so. He swallowed hard, his throat dry, his ears straining for the faintest sound. Then, a floorboard creaked directly behind him. Slow, heavy, deliberate. Daniel's body locked in place, fear rooting him to the floor. The phone vibrated once more in his palm, buzzing against his skin. The screen lit up, bathing the kitchen in cold light. Another missed call. The same number, only this time the caller ID displayed a name. Michael. The phone buzzed once, twice, then stopped. The silence that followed was worse than the sound. Daniel stood motionless, staring at the glowing screen. He didn't dare turn around. He didn't dare move at all. His brother's warning echoed endlessly in his mind. Don't move. He's here. And then the screen went black. The kitchen light flickered. Something exhaled in the darkness behind him.